Interesting Particulars of Monsieur Mozart, by Anonymous. Mozart, the celebrated German musician, was born at Salzburg in the year 1756. His father was also a musician of some eminence, but not to be compared with the son, of whom we have the following account, in one of the monthly miscellanies, taken by Mr. Busby from some biographical sketches, of two eminent German professors. At the age of 3 years, young Mozart, attending to the lessons which his sister, then 7 years old, was receiving at the harpsichord, he became acquainted with harmony, and when she had left the instrument, he would instantly place himself at it, find the thirds, sound them with the liveliest pg-45 joy, and employ whole hours at the exercise. His father, urged by such early and striking indications of genius, immediately began to teach him some little airs, and soon perceived that his pupil improved even beyond the hopes he had formed of him. Half an hour was generally sufficient for his acquiring a minuet, or a little song, which, when once learned, he would of himself perform with taste and expression. At the age of 6 years, he made such a progress as to be able to compose short pieces for the harpsichord, which his father was obliged to commit to paper for him. From that time, nothing made any impression upon him but harmony, and infantine amusements lost all their attractions, unless music had a share in them. He had pg-46 advanced from day to day, not by ordinary and insensible degrees, but with a rapidity which hourly excited new surprise in his parents, the happy witnesses of his progress. His father, returning home one day with a stranger, found little Mozart with a pen in his hand. "What are you writing?" said he. "A concerto for the harpsichord," replied the child. "Let us see it," rejoined the father. "It is a marvelous concerto, without doubt." He then took the paper, and saw nothing at first but a mass of notes mingled with blots of ink, by the maladdress of the young composer, who, unskilled in the management of the pen, had dipped it too freely in the ink, and having blotted and smeared his paper, had endeavored to make pg-47 out his ideas with his fingers. But on a closer examination, his father was lost in wonder, and his eyes, delighted and flowing with tears, became riveted to the notes. "See," exclaimed he to the stranger, "how just and regular it all is, but it is impossible to play it, it is too difficult." "It is a concerto," said the child, "and must be practiced till one can play it. Hear how this part goes." He then sat down to perform it, but was not able to execute the passages with sufficient fluency to do justice to his own ideas. Extraordinary as his manual facility was universally allowed to be, for his age, it did not keep pace with the progress of his knowledge and invention. Such an instance of intellectual advancement, in a child only 6 years of age, is so pg-48 far out of the common road of nature, that we can only contemplate the fact with astonishment, and acknowledge that the possible rapidity of mental maturation is not to be calculated. In the year 1762, his father took him and his sister to Munich, where he performed a concerto before the Elector, which excited the admiration of the whole court. Nor was he less applauded at Vienna, where the emperor called him the little sorcerer. His father gave him lessons only on the harpsichord, but he privately taught himself the violin, and his command of the instrument afforded the elder Mozart the utmost surprise, when he one day, at a concert, took a second violin, and acquitted himself with more than passable address. True genius pg-49 sees no obstacles. It will not, therefore, excite our wonder, if his constant success, in whatever he attempted, begot an unbounded confidence in his own powers. He had even the laudable hardihood to undertake to qualify himself for the first violin, and did not long remain short of the necessary proficiency. He had an ear so correct that he felt the most minute discordancy, and such a fondness for study that it was frequently necessary to take him by force from the instrument. This love of application never diminished. He every day passed a considerable time at his harpsichord, and generally practiced till a late hour at night. Another characteristical trait of real genius, always full of its object, and lost as it were in itself. pg-50. It is lamentable that premature genius, too, rarely enjoys a long career. The acceleration of nature in the mental powers seems to hurry the progress of the animal economy, and to anticipate the regular close of temporal existence. In the year 1791, Mozart, just after he had received the appointment of Maître de Chapelle of the Church of St. Peter, and when he was only 35 years of age, paid the last tribute, and left the world at once to admire the brilliancy and lament the shortness of his earthly sojournment. Indefatigable, even to his death, he produced, during the last few months of his life, his three great masterpieces, La Flûte Enchantée, La Clémence de Titus, and a Requiem, his PG 51 last production. La Flûte Enchantée was composed for one of the theaters at Vienna, and no dramatic olio could ever boast of a greater success. Every air struck the audience with a new and sweet surprise, and the tout ensemble was calculated to afford the deepest and most varied impressions. This piece had, in fact, so great a number of successive representations that, for a long time, it was unnecessary to consult the opera bill, which only announced a permanent novelty. And the airs selected from it and repeated throughout the empire, as well in the cottage as in the palace, and which the echoes have resounded in the most distant provinces, favored the idea that Mozart had actually the design to enchant all Germany with his Flûte Enchantée. Page 52. La Clémence de Titus was requested by the states of Bohemia for the coronation of Leopold. The composer began it in his carriage, during his route to Prague, and finished it in 18 days. Some circumstances attending his last composition, the Requiem, the last effort of his genius, are too interesting to be omitted. A short time before his death, a stranger came to him with the request that he would compose as speedily as possible a Requiem for a Catholic prince, who, perceiving himself on the verge of the grave, wished, by the execution of such a piece, to soothe his mind and familiarize it to the idea of his approaching dissolution. Mozart undertook the work, and the stranger deposited with him, as a secu PG 53 ridi, 400 ducats, though the sum demanded was only 200. The composer immediately began the work, and during its progress, felt his mind unusually raised and agitated. He became, at length, so infatuated with his Requiem that he employed not only the day but some hours of the night in its composition. One day, while he was conversing with Madame Mozart on the subject, he declared to her that he could not but be persuaded that it was for himself he was writing this piece. His wife, distressed at her inability to dissipate so melancholy an impression, prevailed on him to give her the score. He afterwards appearing somewhat tranquilized and more master of himself, she returned the score to him, and he soon relapsed into PG 50 for his former despondency. On the day of his death, he asked her for the Requiem, which was accordingly brought to his bed. "Was I not right," said he, "when I declared that it was for myself I was composing this funeral piece?" And the tears trickled from his eyes. This production of a man impressed, during its composition, with a presentiment of his approaching death, is unique in its kind, and contains passages which have frequently drawn tears from the performers. Only one complaint escaped him during his malady. "I must quit life," said he, "precisely at the moment when I could enjoy it, free from care and inquietude at the very time when independent of sordid speculations, and at liberty to follow my own inclina PG 55 tions, I should have to write from the impulses of my own heart, and I am torn from my family, just when in a situation to serve it." Mozart, at the time of his death, was considerably involved in debt, but Vienna and Prague disputed the honor of providing for his widow and children. Encyclopaedia Britannica.